Welcome to New York Got Game.
All right, we're back with the final New York Got Game episode for the month of August. Sadly, the summer is almost over, but the month of August has been pretty good for the Liberty since coming back from the Olympic break. The team was red hot until Saturday when they fell to the Connecticut Sun and their 8-game winning streak came to an end. But the Liberty will look to start a new streak this week as they hit the road for games out west against the Mercury, Sparks, and the Storm. Speaking of women's basketball, I'm excited about this week's guest because we're going to talk about the sport. So, Tim Kittrell takes us to the break.
The Knicks are heating up.
As a native New Yorker who loves basketball, one of my loves is not just watching the sport and its evolution, but how people are a part of that evolution. Here in the Big Apple, there's so many great people who continue to elevate young hoopers to stardom on and off the court. There's a woman here in NYC who is helping to grow the game for young women. I've watched her work from afar, and now today I have the pleasure of having her in studio with me. It's the founder of Grow Our Game, the amazing Chienè Joy Jones. Chienè, how you doing?
Hey, I'm blessed. I'm so blessed to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on and speak some testimonies and truth about Grow Our Game.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I've been watching you from afar for some time. We were talking about this before we started recording, and I've just loved the work you've done. And then there's just been, for the audience to know, there's been such great energy around Chienè and what she does, and everybody's been telling me, hey, you got to have Chienè on New York Got Game. You got to have her come on the show. Here you are. We made it happen. And it was very easy, right?
It was pretty seamless.
It was fine.
Thank God I have a driver's license, right? Because I didn't have one but 2 years ago. But yeah, it was a quick drive, was able to get down. Thank you so much.
Nah, glad to have you here. So I want to talk to people. We're going to talk about a lot on this show. We're going to talk about Chienè's origins, starting Grow Our Game, and all of that. But Chienè, before we start that, we got to go back to the beginning for you. So we're going to take it back for a bit. Now, I know some things about you. You're a Queens native, okay?
Check.
Representing Briarwood, check.
Check.
So, as a native New Yorker, can you share with us how you first got into basketball growing up in NYC and what drew you to the sport? What did you love about basketball? Because, you know, I love the sport. I know we both do, but
yeah.
What drew you to the sport and how'd you fall in love with it?
So I wish I could say that it was because of a particular player or a particular team, but it wasn't. It was actually because of my best friend, Yvette. She was actually a dentist out in Chicago. So shout out to Dr. Battle. And, you know, it was just one of those things where we were in elementary school. We were always kind of like girls that loved playing with the boys, girls that loved climbing gates and racing against the boys. And one day she was just like, hey, Chienè, like, do you want to come with me to these basketball tryouts? And I was kind of like, okay, let me ask my mom. She said yes. It ended up being really, really close to where I lived anyway, right, back in Briarwood. And so that was really my first orientation to basketball. And so salute to the girls that are playing sports and end up just going because of their friends.
I like that. There's nothing deep. It wasn't like you saw a game that changed the moment. Just your friend was like, come on, let's do this. And there you were.
So that got me into the door.
Right.
I think that the bigger piece and what really captured like my interest and my heart to the game after that was being around a bunch of fellow young girls that were just all about basketball, right? And that was the first time that I ever was in a space when sports was the main topic, right? I was always in academic spaces where there were like girls just killing it, right? I was always in spaces where there was like young girls of color just killing it. I think that for me, the first experience I ever had of seeing actual like girls playing sports was in fact those CYO tryouts. And after that, it was kind of like a done deal. And fun fact about that team, every single one of us ended up going to college to play basketball. So from the ripe age of 9 years old up, we all ended up going to college and actually playing.
That's interesting, too, that you guys all ended. I'm always intrigued about that when people either coming from a certain space or place and that happens and you end up going somewhere. Yeah. This kind of brings me to the next part of what I'm going to talk to you about, your experience, what it's like playing basketball in New York City, because it's different. For us as native New Yorkers, right, you being from Queens, I'm from Brooklyn, it's different playing here and loving the sport here. But for you in particular, as a young female athlete, were there any challenges you faced in playing the sport here in New York?
Yeah, so I think that the interesting piece for me during that time, right, which again, I'm kind of dating myself now, but we're talking about the 90s in New York City, there weren't many AAU girls basketball teams. And so as a result, you were either, and again, I'm from Queens, right, but we already knew that the travel teams, you were either playing for the Liberty Bells or you were playing for New York City Gauchos. There really wasn't an in-between. And so again, there are a number of teams that were very much so like local grassroots programs in different areas, sometimes in different housing projects, right? Douglas had a really, really strong following. Also Kips Bay up in the Bronx. They had a girls program as well. But I think that again, for me, after CYO, it was a matter of trying to figure out where I was going to go after, right? To play actual college, actual travel basketball. And so ultimately ended up choosing Gauchos, which is why a lot of people think that I'm from the Bronx. I am not from the Bronx.
You got to make that clear.
I'm from Queens. But even throughout the rest of my career, right, and you'll kind of see this pattern, it was just a great experience of playing around other talented young women and us traveling. And, you know, they're kind of like hood scouts, right? Because we were traveling like 10 of us in a small little van driving down to Boo Williams or going over to Deep South, which at that time games were at UNC and Duke, right? That was kind of in NC State. But now you can't really have games, like AAU games at like Division I locations, venues. But yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. And again, it was a lot because in the summer, right, we're just kind of finishing out the summer here in New York City. It was like war. Like we would go to play in certain tournaments, and because we were Gauchos, it was like a really big deal to play against other teams. And so those other teams would never get it to us easy. Like it was a dogfight in many tournaments over the years.
The interesting challenge that you faced, right? We're dating ourselves because we're about the same age, right? But the interesting challenge that you faced there too was just like finding the opportunities, because there were so limited opportunities for women at that time, and we'll get into to what you're doing now with that. My follow-up to you on that is, at that time, because of the challenges of that, did you ever think that, okay, this is something that's going to be a part of my life, this is something I'm really going to do? You got to play in college and do beyond that, but at the time, because of limited opportunities, did you see for yourself as a young woman playing basketball, hey, out in New York, this is something that is really going to be part of my life? Because basketball is a huge part of your life now, but did you see that? Yeah.
So I was also a track athlete. If we go back during the time I was in high school, I was a really great pentathlon and also a hurdler, 100 meter, 400 meter. But for me, track wasn't really my like passion. It was just something I did that I was actually kind of good at to keep myself in shape during the off season of basketball, right? Because again, high school is just the winter season. I think that I never necessarily thought that I would be playing. I definitely don't think that I thought that I would be playing at NYU. Mm-hmm. I knew that because of the track that I was on, that I was going to be playing basketball in college though. And I think that nowadays that's a little different because there's so many folks that are playing travel, and people don't understand that travel doesn't necessarily give you a rites of passage to play college basketball, right? There's a certain talent, skill set. There's a lot of things that go into making a college team, and it's just not because, you know, your family's paying a ton of money to travel all around the country with your AAU team. Like in New York City back in the 90s, if you traveled, you were going to college because you were that good.
You were that good.
The girls that were not good, they didn't travel.
Right.
And that's just what it was, right? And it had nothing necessarily to do with like economics, because even if you had the money, if you weren't good, you weren't on the team. So that's also where the dynamic changes tremendously now in this like $1 billion market of like youth sports.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Huge market, and it does give people some false sense that they think they're going to make it to a level that they're not. So there's a lot that's going on there. All right, we got to talk about what you do now, right? Which is grow our game. You're the founder of that. Can you explain to the people what the organization that you started does and what inspired you to create Grow Our Game? Was there a particular moment for you or experience that pushed you to say, okay, this is what I want to do? So tell us what it is and what inspired you to create Grow Our Game.
Yep. So after playing, so I ended up playing college basketball at NYU, right? And so that was a tremendous opportunity. Had other Division I options though, and turned those down because I actually wanted to have a very, I wanted to have a winning career in college, and that's just what it was. The college teams that were recruiting me that were Division I weren't necessarily like winning teams at the time, even though again, you recruit better talent to try to win games, right? As you bring in more talent. So I chose Division III, and I chose NYU. It was the best decision I made in my life. But I think that after that experience, it gave me a chance of getting a little bit back into the community, right? And so I initially started mentoring a young girl, Regina Washington. who was a participant at Millbank. And so after her playing basketball over at Millbank, it was kind of like, all right, what else can I do other than helping just one young girl, right? And so I started coaching, and I got into it very early on because it was a bit of a low-hanging fruit. I ended up coaching over at Riverside Church, and I was there for about 7 years, ended up bringing some of my old teammates to come and help me. Many of those girls moved on to, again, just being amazing women currently, one of them being one of my other mentees, Batuli Kamara, who's running another program. We'll talk about that offline, Wake, and is just doing tremendous things with herself, right, after playing at UConn. But after Riverside, I ended up returning back to Gauchos. And ultimately, my time at Gauchos was tremendous because it really gave me an opportunity to build out a pipeline of future college basketball players, right? Like, I was very clear on the skill set, very clear on what was needed, very, very big into development, very, very big into development. And I started seeing, as I was moving up with the younger group that I had, that there were younger girls that wanted to kind of join in, and I kind of had to say no because I wasn't going to be able to go back down and go back to younger groups. And so it really got to a point where, after I knew that I was going to be wrapping up my tenure at Gauchos, and again, I was there for almost 7 years at Gauchos as well, I was like, wait a minute, there's something else going on here, right? And so identifying what that problem was, which was there was really nothing available for development when it came to super young girls. And I was like looking, there was boys programs here, right? Gauchos was doing their weekend program. There wasn't really many girls mixed into the mix. Sometimes there would be a few girls that were just tough to want to be with the boys, but most of them just didn't want to be with the boys. There are a lot of programs all throughout New York City for the boys. And I was like, well, where are the girls programs, right? And where are the free girls programs? This was the other piece. And so I was like, all right, let's try to figure it out. I was athletics director at the Harlem Children's Zone during the time, and I was literally like planning it out. And so my coaches were like, all right, well, if this is what you want to do, like, we'll support you too. We'll figure out how to help you with it if you need help. And that's really how Grow Our Game came about. It was like literally writing in my office and trying to like brainstorm and figure out like what we can do to help younger girls. And I knew I would have to check out, right, from coaching the older girls to be able to give that opportunity. And so again, that last group of girls that I coached at Gauchos ended up continuing on to college, and I was able to kind of say Mamba out and start with Grow Our Game. And it's been a tremendous blessing. So
that started, what year did you start Grow Our Game?
So 2018, I always say, is when we started, right? We're in our 6th year currently. However, the paperwork, the documentation, and shout out to New York City Small Business Solutions, because that's how we were able to get our non-for-profit status for free, right? We had some amazing pro bono attorneys on our case, but we officially got the certification in 2017. Our first ever session that we had was in 2018. So I will hold 2018 to our 2018. Year. That's it.
I think what's interesting when you hear all that, right, and I'm glad we had the progression of this in this discussion, is, you know, you played, there was this need for this from going back to when you started playing.
True.
You finished playing, you're coaching, you see the need, and young women and parents are coming to you and like, hey, can you train my daughter? There's nothing to do that. And it always seems to me like no matter what it is in life, right, Chiené, the best things come out of recognizing what the need is that's there. And you recognize that as a former player, coach, you recognize that. So now we've got to talk about influence, because how do you see Grow Our Game influencing the current landscape of girls basketball in New York City? Because it came from a point where there's the need. Now you're doing the thing that has been needed. So what's the influence been on girls basketball in New York City?
So I think that obviously right now, women's basketball is on fire, right? We can't deny it. Like, we got sold out crowds at the New York Liberty. We have the NCAA women's basketball tournament having major viewpoints and records. I think that the biggest piece for me and for Grow Our Game and for our girls is that we started with 6 young girls inside the Gauchos gym, right? Coldest winter of 2018. And now we currently are supporting over 275 girls in New York City, right? We're in East New York, Brooklyn. We're in Harlem. we're in Jamaica, Queens. We have our pop-ups in Parkchester up in the Bronx. We also were in the South Bronx a couple years back. I think that if you're going to talk about influence, you're first going to look at the numbers. And then after the numbers, you're going to look at the following, right? And I think that we're creating a very unique product. And for many, when you say product, most folks are going to put a price tag to it. And so I think that the biggest piece that I'm working on right now, and we're talking about influence, is this opportunity of identifying potential partnerships, right? Whether that's corporate sponsors, whether that's local grassroots sponsors, whether that's working with other fellow CDOs. That's the biggest piece for us, because we know that what we're putting out is something really, really special and unique. And we're the only program in New York City that's doing this for girls 4 to 12 for free. Right?
Only, just to be clear on that again, so people, the only program in New York that's doing it for that age range for free. So the accessibility, which I know is huge for you. Yeah. And we've talked about it. I know that means so much to you.
Yeah.
Is that the thing that means the most to you in terms of influence? The fact that what you're doing is amazing, obviously, but the fact that it's accessible to so many?
I think accessibility right now is kind of in our first phase, right? And so when I think about Grow Our Game, like now you're kind of getting to my business strategy component. So first phase is literally getting girls to come into gyms, right? Getting parents to buy into the importance of, if a sport is just as good for your son, it should be good enough for your daughter, right? And so debunking those myths, getting parents brave to want to have their daughters to learn the game of basketball. That's the first phase. But the second phase after that is literally being able to codify what we're doing and bringing that not only into the places that we already are in, but throughout New York City, right? And so there's a reason why we're in East New York, Brooklyn, 11207. There's a reason why we're in Central Harlem, one of the poorest communities, right, in New York City. There's a reason why we're in Jamaica, Queens, 11435. I'm stating these zip codes because, again, when we look deeper into the data, these are some of the most at risk, most underserved communities in New York City. So I'm very real when it comes to access. But I think, again, the next step, which is going to be phase 2, is seeing the trajectory of our participants. And so when those girls are continuing on in through society with college degrees, and it may not be in basketball, and that's okay, right? But we want them to be able to go through, right, the education pipeline, finish with the college degree, become successful women. And again, there's a stat that's also tremendous. 94% of women in C-suite positions played youth sports. There's something powerful we're working with here when we talk about access to sports and girls. And so again, phase 1, we're in, and this is really part of the honeymoon phase. Phase 2, that's coming up. And I would say it's probably going to be in another 7 years. We'll have the data to really, really powerfully talk about the work that we're doing and why it's important to invest in Grow Our Game and what we're doing for these young girls.
Yeah, and invest is such a key word to that. And we're going to get into a little bit of that later about the future of Grow Our Game, as you talked about phase 2, which is coming in. You're going to grow. People are going to invest. We putting it out there. Got to put the positivity out there. Speaking of girls hoops, I know you are around it. I know you watch a lot of it. When you look around New York City, who are some of the standout girls players that you see in New York City and that you feel people who maybe don't know should keep an eye on?
So I think that we know about the older girls right now. So I want to really go deeper down into the younger girls. And so the younger crew that is coming up in New York City right now, tremendous. And we're talking about guard play because, again, we kind of start out as runts, and as we kind of get a little bit older now, we start seeing who's going to be super tall and who's going to actually kind of stay around the same height. But I think about girls like Ellie Robinson, right? She plays currently with Riverside Church. I think about Madison Bravo, who's currently playing with Castle. I also think about Serenity Hooper, for sure. She actually bounced around for a few different programs. I think she's doing a little bit with Riverside as well right now. And then also Jen Pinnock over at PD Nation in Queens, right? So these girls are all from different areas in New York City, super, super young. Super, super young. And I think that the exciting piece is when we're talking about 10-year-olds, why are we talking about 10-year-old girls? These girls are putting in work. And so the one thing I can say about girls basketball, women's basketball in general, if you put in the work, you will get better. It's literally direct correlations. So those 4 young girls that I know, and again, from just being around and repping their games and knowing their families. They're working so much. And many of these families, they're not paying for trainers. They're in the park. They're just doing park work. They're doing all the things that, right, like we used to do
I was gonna
when
say,
we were younger, because we didn't have no trainers.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a bit old school, right? We're showing our age here, people. That's a bit old school in that, right? You're just going out to the park and working. You're not, yes, you have the travel programs, you got the AAU programs you're part of, but you're just out here working on your game, trying to grow your game, grow our game.
Yeah.
You're just trying to do that, right? And you also see a lot in that, the work ethic for those young ladies.
Oh yeah, these young ladies, they're on it. And I think that that's the encouragement too that I try to give to our game girls, right? And to the parents. It's okay that you never played basketball before. All you have to do is grab a ball, rebound, and pass. All you have to do is just encourage. All you have to do is actually walk them to the park, get them there so that they can do the things. And so, it might be old school, but to me, that method works, especially at this age. Once we get a little bit older, then we can start talking about trainers and all these different things, small group work, all those things. But you want the girls to have a bit of ownership, right? And their development as well. So they'll come to our sessions, but more times than not, they're also out at the park playing, dribbling their basketball, going to the store with mom, like just doing the things that they need so that they can also get better. Yeah,
that's how you fall in love with the game. That helps too. Now, Chiené, from your vantage point, we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but you've seen women's basketball grow so much from the time you were playing it early on, and you've seen it grow nationally. It's really exploded during your career. What milestones stand out to you about the growth of women's basketball right now, and just from you watching it grow so much in your basketball life?
Sure. So I think back in 1997 when the WNBA first started, I'm not talking about the ABL, I'm talking about the WNBA. 1997, folks were like, oh, they'll fold in a year. 5 years came. Oh, they'll fold in another couple years. 10 years came. Oh, they'll fold it. So it got to a point where there was some sustainability, right? And we were kind of kicking all the haters. But I think that outside from the WNBA staying through, there's also now NIL, where you have NCAA women's college players, right? All college players being able to actually make money off their image and likeness and their name. That's huge. And I think that another big milestone, of course, like without a question, had to have been the explosion, right? You got your Angel Reeses. You got your Caitlin Clarks. They're in the W right now. But we also have a couple of really big names that are also on their way, right? I also think about the 1996 Olympic team, right? USA women's basketball team. That was a monumental moment for women's basketball and women's sports in general. But I think, again, right now, what we're showing, especially after all of the records that we continue to break through women's sports, is women's sports sells. Yeah. And if women's sports sells, then that means there's opportunity to invest and actually make a profit, right? There used to be a myth about investing in women's sports and you're not making any money. You're spending more than you're receiving back, right? Now, the beauty about where we're at in this space is that if you're going to invest, you're going to actually get a profit and a return. And so that's really exciting because once you have money behind what this is, which again, it's a great product. It's just going to bring more and more opportunities for the younger girls that are coming up. And
I feel like we're seeing this in real time now. And I love that you talked about those milestones. And the reason I asked that is because there's been a bit of a narrative that women's basketball has just exploded in the last year. That is, there's people who believe that, right? Like they think it begins and ends with Caitlin Clark. And that is not the case, right? There's been all this stuff that's gone into this before this, and I think someone like you who's played and coached and is really entrenched in the game, it's important for people to hear that. Now, you brought up the W, and I want to talk to you about the W because we both love the WNBA. What are your thoughts on this 2024 WNBA season thus far? What teams, I know you're a big Liberty fan, you go to the games, what teams and players have caught your attention this year in the W?
Okay, so I am a huge New York Liberty fan. I'm a huge New York Liberty fan, so much so that I decided to invest, my own and be a season ticket holder. That's really important to me. Been doing that for the last 4 years. Think that, again, if I'm going to talk about investment and promotion, I have to also put my money where my mouth is, right? So that's a fair statement. But I think that for the New York Liberty right now, we're having sellout crowds. they're obviously just clinched first in the conference, right? They're making the playoffs. We're expecting a championship. But I think that, again, I also wouldn't be remiss if I didn't give a big shout out to Teresa Weatherspoon. She's the head coach for the Chicago Sky. Obviously, Angel Reese is on that team, along with a couple of other amazing basketball players, right? But I love Teresa Weatherspoon so much because of the fact that she gave so much energy to the Liberty organization, but also to anyone that was around her, right? I'm sure that you've been around Teaspoon before, and she's just tremendous. Like, I think her energy and her spirit and her faith really roots her in this crazy sports space. But I think also going back to New York Liberty, right? The excitement of Breanna Stewart, the amazing, like, sassiness of Betnijah Laney, right? Sabrina Ionescu, I'm wearing her sneakers. We love that whole team, but I also think we have a couple of, like, younger players, right? A couple of younger players like Jay Sherrod, who just signed with them after being cut and after being drafted, right? Like, this is part of, like, that crazy cycle of being in the W, but there's such beautiful testimonies and stories, and I feel like our team this year, they've gone through so much already this season, and it's making them even closer. Right.
Yeah, I've loved that. I've loved watching, just as you mentioned, all throughout the league, because you're talking about whether you're a Liberty fan and what Teaspoon's been doing with the Sky, and they're in playoff contention. They haven't been playing so well lately, but they're still there in playoff contention.
Yeah.
And, yeah, they love her. You've probably seen this when she's come back for Liberty games to the Barclays Center.
Ovation.
She gets a standing ovation. I think one of the last – actually, I was there for the last time the two teams played, and – she got a big standing ovation, and it was like one of those things that kind of gives you a little bit of chills, but it was really good. Now, speaking of Liberty, got to get into them too, okay? Because I see your face. They've been strong contenders this season. Now
they are the contenders. Well, they're not the contenders. They're the contenders.
Okay, so we're gonna get into this because they just had their 8-game winning streak snapped to the Connecticut Sun on Saturday. They've won 8 out of the last 9 games. We talked about this at the top of the show. They have a big trip coming up to the West Coast where they can bounce back. But they're number 1 in the W, okay? Best record in the league, 25-5 through 30 games, 10 games left to play. You just said it. They are the contenders, Chienè. So that tells me that you think that they have what it takes to win it all this year. Is that accurate? Do you feel like they can get it done this year?
That is 1,000% correct. And I think that the interesting piece about this team is that we're actually going to be a different team when the playoffs get here, right? We have a couple of injuries right now.
Okay,
so Sabrina's
Betnijah, right?
Betnijah's like, she's having her open run, so she's kind of like getting back into the swing of things behind the scenes. But she'll be coming back. I think that, again, with Sherrod being signed, like, we have someone that can be a dog and play some defense and, like, get some tempo. Obviously, we still have Vandersloot that's like, she's got the mask on. I think it gives her a really good element of, like, toughness, though. So I'll take the mask. I think she should wear the mask the whole time. But again, KT, like, she's a dog playing tough. Fine bitch, she's, like, really, really good too. And obviously she played with Germany during the Olympics. I think the Olympics this year just really helped kind of tune things in. And then, of course, you have some of the players that didn't make the team, right, that were still able to kind of get some additional training during the break. But yeah, like, we're killing it.
When I hear you say that, it's one of the strengths I think of this Liberty team is their depth, right? They're so deep, and that's one of the things I think that hurt them last year when they got to the playoffs. They were relying a lot on Stewie, and she seemed to be a little bit burnt out, but they're so deep, and they're playing well. I mean, despite the loss Saturday. They don't have Betnijah Laney Hamilton. She'll be back. She's one of the best two-way players in the league.
Yeah. And Sabrina just got back, right? So she was still trying to, like, recalibrate.
Right.
Which, again, like, she had an amazing Olympic. Like, she had a great Olympic. So it's going to come in time because, again, I feel like for us, we're like a team of, like, different personalities throughout the season. But we also still got to take care of business. So I'm not going to take anything for granted. I'm not taking that trip that we about to have, the road trip, for granted on the West Coast. But I think, again, the exciting piece about the Liberty is, like, we have hope, but also facts, right? Like, I'm not even worried about the Aces this year. I'm worried about a few other teams this year.
Okay, let's talk about that because I've been having this conversation lately.
Okay.
This is the thing. Should the Liberty be the favorites to win the title? Now, you said you look at them as the contender. You're not worried about the Aces. They are the two-time defending champions. You're not worried about them. Who are the teams that concern you? Who do you think is the biggest threat to the Liberty in terms of maybe potentially knocking them off?
So I think we match up well with the Aces, which is why I'm not so worried. I'm very worried about Minnesota. I'm super concerned about Minnesota. And honestly, it's still going to be a dogfight with Connecticut, especially with them getting Marina, which I thought that we were going to pick her up. But that's a whole nother story for another day.
We'll have to get into that another day. But there is a look for them with Marina Mabry.
That was a huge upgrade for them. She's she's a killer. She's a shooter. She's from New Jersey, which is why I was hoping that she'd come to Liberty. But it's all good. She's at Connecticut. She always just finds a way to destroy us anytime she plays us. That's just her MO, no matter what team she plays on. So that's going to be a really good series too. But yeah.
And you saw how Mabry helped them in the game on Saturday night because Connecticut, they've struggled shooting the ball from the outside, and she kind of helped stabilize things for them as well too. So it'll be really interesting. Minnesota, as you mentioned, beat Liberty twice this year, also in the Commissioner's Cup. So we'll see.
They don't match up so well with us.
No,
that's why. We don't match up so well
with them. I do think that Minnesota is the team that matches up the best with the Liberty right now. They've got the defense, they've got the outside shooting. They match up.
But don't sleep on some of the other teams, right? Because Indiana, they are coming teams with a vengeance. Chicago, they got some good size, they got some good toughness, right? Obviously, they ended up losing the other night, but I think that they're kind of approaching with some steam too.
The young teams are coming.
They're
Chicago,
coming.
Indiana's coming.
And they're not scared.
They're not scared. There's no fear. They're coming. They're not looking at the Liberty we can't beat you. They're coming for their neck. So for sure. When it comes to watching the Liberty, who's the one player you love to watch, and what do you love about their game? Who's the one player on the team you're like, I love watching this player. She's killing it out there. I love her game. Who's that player for you? So
there are a number of players on the roster that I absolutely love, right? I think that the biggest thing for me is that I'm always cheering on and rooting for an underdog. And so I mentioned Jay Sherrod, and I think that for her being able to sign with the Liberty just really solidifies, and I really hope that does solidify with her, that we really want her and that she belongs and that she fits, right, with this team this season. I think that she's going to help us in more ways than we can even imagine right now. And it's not that she's a rookie. I think, again, she can defend. And she has pace and tempo, right, anytime she has the ball in her hands. And so that's something that we're going to need looking into closing out the rest of the regular season and going into playoffs. Yeah, she looks like the kind of player that not can only help the Liberty just this year, and I do think there could be spots. You never know who gets hurt. You don't know what happens. I don't want any more injuries. Yeah, you don't want to. But to your point, look at what's recently happened, right? You've seen Benijah go down. Sab was just out for a couple of games, and we saw Sherrod be able to come in and give good minutes and not look. She didn't look shook at all. Right. She looked ready to go. So. Well, she didn't play in that Connecticut game, so we're going to see what, Well, she came in. Did you see her coming at the end and getting that little scuffle with Chienè? You saw that? Yeah, outside of that. But so you want to see more minutes for her? Yeah. Okay. That's something to keep an eye on. I think people should keep an eye on that with her. Okay, so we look at the W, right? A'ja Wilson, best player in the league right now. I think everybody would agree with that. And then there's a lot of talk about Caitlin Clark, her impact on the game and her talents. But, in basketball, we always like to look ahead. So who do you think's the player or players that we should be keeping our eye on in women's basketball? Basically, who's got next in terms of being an upcoming superstar in the women's game? So I don't think there's much surprise here, but we'll talk about it, right? I think it's definitely a duo, and they're on competing teams. So we're talking about Paige Beckers, and we're talking about Flau'jae over at LSU. So Paige at UConn, Flau'jae at LSU, both big money NIL players, right? Even trumping some of the boys, right? I think that for what they're bringing to the game right now, it's something that's going to translate on the professional level. I think also another big piece is Paige is also part owner with Unrivaled. Unrivaled hasn't even begun yet, but this is obviously, right, a huge opportunity for women to be able to stay at home, and they'll, at home meaning the United States, they'll be in Miami playing on this 3-on-3 tournament where they're actually getting paid like top dollar. Think that it's huge that someone that's still in college is actually a part owner, right? Like that's big. And then Flau'jae, obviously she's doing her like rapping, right, music artist thing. She was out a lot of places performing, right? Can't really name the list because I felt like looking on social media, she's just everywhere.
Yeah, she was at the BT Awards show.
Yes.
She's been a bunch of places,
yes,
right? Yeah,
everywhere. And so that's dope to me, right? That we see these two young entrepreneurs, these two athletes, these two young women that have clearly a great team around them, where they are making business moves, making money moves, but they still got more eligibility left, right? So definitely Paige and Flau'jae, they're going to have a really exciting season. I think UConn's also going to be really up there in the conversation. I feel like they always are, but folks are always like bashing them like every year, but every year they find a way to make it to like the Final Four. But I'm really rooting for Paige. And I'm really rooting for Flau'jae because they're such really good girls.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of both of their games, so I'm really excited to see what they can do in the W. You're right. I think they'll kill it in women's college basketball this year, but I think they can even do more on the next level. And they're also, like you mentioned, stars. And we're seeing something that you mentioned, which is seeing women with ownership. Once you talk about Paige with Unrivaled, but also owning their own image, their brand, all of that, right? And then being able to profit off of that and knowing the power of their image and their brand. I think that's been really dope to see as well, too. So when we talk about basketball and growing the game of basketball, which you do, growing women's basketball and women's sports, it's growing. We both agree with this. We've talked about that, but we still got a ways to go, right? We still have a ways to go. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see facing women's basketball today, both at the grassroots and the professional level?
Sure. So I think that first on the grassroots level, there's too many folks that just want to make a buck, right? And I think that it takes away from the opportunity of finding girls that will ultimately end up being your next Paiges, your next Flau'jaes, right? I think that the piece around money is something that really does hurt young girls from participating in sports. And we've talked about it before, but I just want to bring it up again. Girls are dropping out of sport, right? Twice the rate of boys by the age of 14. The same exact study, if you look deeper into it, actually highlights that girls within inner city communities, the same communities that we serve within Grow Our Game, Central Harlem, East New York, Brooklyn, Jamaica, Queens, the South Bronx, they're not even getting the opportunity to begin, to even try to play, right? And I think a lot of this is, again, because of the financial component. So that's one piece on the grassroots, without a doubt. I also think that something that's very unique here, geographically in New York, access to gyms, right? This has been a big passion project of mine, right? Of figuring out how to better access New York City gym spaces. And I think if you look at the New York City public school system, we're the largest in the world, right? And so being the largest in the world also means that we have a tremendous amount of space, right? And gym space. And the fact that we don't have true access to those spaces during days that, right, are just, it's not being used, completely underutilized spaces in New York City, it's also really hurting. So that's definitely a vision of mine, and finding and identifying partnerships, and hopefully we'll have Nike on board with that too, because I really need their support with trying to get this program going. That won't be probably for another year or so. And so that's grassroots in New York City. But I think that on a bigger level, right, when we're talking about this fandom that's starting to explode, right, in sports, I remember New York Liberty tickets being $5.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Here we go.
Okay.
I gotta get there.
You gotta get there.
So it's kind of like the gift and the curse, right? Because we have an amazing team now, New York Liberty. But to get a ticket, right? To get a ticket, you're asking a family to spend $25, right? Nosebleeds, you're paying the fees and all the service charges. Maybe that's like ends up becoming like 29, maybe like 31 for a family, right? So now that's 4. So we're looking at close to $125, right, to get themselves to a game. So my vision, because again, we have to be really careful with where we're going, right? we want teams to generate high dividends and profit. But we also don't want to forget about the families who don't have access. And so I think about those grassroots times back when the Liberty in the 90s, when they were giving out tickets, right? They were giving the tickets away. Now we're in a space where it is about making money and it is about charging. But I think that we still have to also find a way to be true to community. And so I've seen the efforts getting a lot better over the last 2 years, right, with the Liberty and the Nets organization, trying to access communities, trying to access through clinics, giving girls more opportunities to get to games for free, which I think is huge. But I also think, again, there's still like space for families who may not have kids that are interested in playing but want to be fans of the game. Right? So I think that that's kind of like a fine line that we dance on many times than not. And the same thing when you're talking about visibility of games, even on TV, right? To end up having to pay for an app to watch a high, big powered game, right? Up in Boston at TD Bank Arena. The only way to access that game was through the WNBA app. It wasn't even available on any sort of local network station. I think that's a really tough pill to swallow.
I agree.
When we're talking about the growth of the game, right? And so we have to really try to find folks that are not being more mindful, but also hearing the ones that are advocating for more access.
I listen to you say all that, and as somebody who are deep into the work of it with your organization, a lot of the talk, Chienè, that goes around growing the game of women's basketball, the sport of women's basketball, I think from people, some genuine and some not so genuine, has always been, oh, it's financial. But you bring up a great point, but there is a cost to that, right? And I've seen it too. Yes, I cover Liberty games, I go there, but I also sometimes go and buy a ticket. And I've seen the price increase in the last couple of years. And part of me is like, man, that's dope. I'm happy. But then you always wonder who's not able to go to those games that used to be able to go to that before. I might be privileged to afford a ticket at a certain price, but other people may not. And I think one of the main things I hope people take away from this conversation, I think a lot of things that you said, Chienè, is what is growth without accessibility? I think that's a fair thing that we should really question and think about as we go forward. And that's why I loved you talking on that and talking and why I asked you both at the grassroots and the professional level, because the accessibility part matters. Now, with all that being said, you talked to me about phase one of Grow Our Game, excuse me. Phase two, you said, is coming. What's next for Grow Our Game? Have you thought about phase three, right? Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're excited about with Grow Our Game? What's next? What's coming next for the people?
Yeah, so without giving away, I guess, too much.
Yeah, you can't give away everything. Not all the
without giving away too much. So I could definitely say that we are in the planning stages of having 2 global opportunities, right? And so that's like super, super exciting. The opportunity of bringing what we have here, and when we're talking about codification, right? Bringing what we have here and running something very, very similar and offering it to a completely different demographic and a completely different country and continent, right? So we are, again, in the talking stages with Girls Got Game out in the Philippines. Mariana Lopez, she was just featured in Forbes magazine for the work that she's doing in the Philippines. We're working with her on identifying a few dates in the spring. And so that's... And then we're also actually working with a really good dear friend of mine of bringing Grow Our Game to Puerto Rico, right? And so...
Yeah, you can say that you're excited.
It's exciting.
This is international growth.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. Growth is exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. We can't give the people too much, but
but there's also a cost, and this is why growth is exciting, but also scary, right? Because now that means that in the small budget that we have to figure out a space to kind of cut a little bit down so that we can end up reallocating it for this global effort, right? Until we can get other folks on board that are really like, wow, how can we support? Like, how can we get this going? Like, what do you need from us, right? I think that that's really part of the next set of conversations, right? The folks that have been supporting, and again, big shout out to Nike and NYCHA, and we got a new partnership coming up with the PAL. Super tremendous. So we just gonna keep going.
You got to keep going. So the growth is beautiful. A lot of good things coming. I think the last thing for me, Chienè, is whenever you do something like what you're doing, there's going to be thought about legacy. So when you think about legacy, what kind of legacy do you want to leave for Grow Our Game? What do you hope that legacy will be when people look back and say, Chienè Joy Jones did Grow Our Game. She created it. She expanded it. She went from phase 1. When we're on phase 37 and everybody's looking at the growth, what do you think the legacy will be?
So I think that it's truly going to be it's going to be the testimonies of my girls, and I think that it's going to be for us to get to the point. And you said phase 37, right? That means my girls are going to be much older, right? Much older. I think about not only them being successful women in whatever they choose to do, whether that's being the best teacher or the best financier or the best lawyer or the best surgeon, right? But I also think about this importance of giving back, like returning the same energy that they received from me back into the program. So I see a tremendous amount of future volunteer coaches that are going to be ready to give some time back to the younger girls because of the opportunity that they had and that they experienced. And again, these testimonies are so powerful because a big step for us this coming year, in addition to all of the other things that we're planning, is getting our girls into boardrooms so that they're meeting with women that have actually played the sport, right? And they may not have been Grow Our Game participants, right? They're not, because our program's only just but so young. But for them to hear those testimonies of those women and to know how powerful sport was for them and what it may still mean to them, right? I think that those connections are really important because part of our legacy is knowing that, again, it's all about work being a beautiful quote that I love to use, right? Is work is love made visible. It's by the prophet Khalil Gibran. And the work that we're doing currently, right? It's literally just showing an opportunity of love, my love for the sport, but also my love for seeing young girls succeed. I think that means so much more to me than them being able to put a ball into the hoop. Even though I need them to get their footwork together, right? I need them to do their best. I need them to try their hardest. But again, it doesn't always equal the type of outcomes and goals that most people looking from the outside may expect, right? It just may be that this is an opportunity to give this girl a boost of confidence because she went into a new school, or maybe her family's having a struggle, and she found something super consistent to be able to keep her on the right path. Or maybe, again, I had a girl that loves playing defense and she used that same toughness, right, from locking a girl up to actually putting that same toughness into the boardroom as an attorney on the stand, like getting someone on the stand. So I think, it's really about them. It's not about me. And that's really, I think, where the game changed for me a couple years back. I realized that this program is like, and it's giving me like goosebumps even talking about it. It's completely transcended me. It's completely transcending almost themselves. And I don't even think those young girls know it yet. Some of our parents kind of do, but I think most of them don't either, right? And that's the excitement about where we're going with Grow Our Game. It's that we are literally building a pipeline of successful leaders of society. And so the investment in that, let me tell you, that's worth far more than anything else. And so that's where we're at with legacy and Grow Our Game.
But that is what legacy is, right? Legacy is it's not about you or me or whomever it is and whatever it is that you do and what you love. And I love that Khalil Gibran quote. It's one of my favorite quotes as well, too. But it's about what it is beyond that, right? And I think when you're putting in love into something, you're thinking about what it is beyond that. And I want to tell you, for everybody, and appreciate you coming up here, you can see that in your work and you can hear it in you talking about it, that you love this sport, but you love what this sport can do for other young women. And I just think that's dope. And you deserve all your flowers right now because the legacy is going to be strong. I mean that because I've been watching your work, and to have you here and talk about it, dope. It's just great. So thank you, because you're doing great work and you're going to continue to do great work.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I don't say this all the time, and every time I do, it's one of my favorite interviews because I really like the work that you do. And I could just see, hey, that's you. And I could see and feel the passion.
Yeah.
And I think when you keep things authentic, and I try to do that in my work, I think that always shines through. So I'm glad to see that from you. So please, sister, keep it up. Keep doing the good work. I love what you do. You're growing the game. You're going to grow. Our game is going to continue to grow.
Period.
And you always have a welcome seat to come and sit here on New York Got Game. Always. So everybody, please, if you don't know, check out Chiené's work, Grow Our Game. If you have a young lady who is looking to get into hoops, wants to be active, this is the person you should definitely talk to. She does a fantastic job. Chienè, thank you again for coming up. I will have you back. You're welcome to come talk Liberty anytime. Any hoops, anything you want to talk about, you got something going on with Grow Our Game, you know who to come to.
I sure will. Don't say that, but I will.
Oh, I mean it. I mean, New York Got Game with Grow Our Game, it's a good combo.
Let's do it. Maybe we get your daughter to come to a session.
That's another thing, because somebody else told me about that. So my daughter, Simone, has to come to a session. She's got to hoop it up. She loves Liberty. She loves hoops. We're going to make it happen.
Yay.
Appreciate you. Again, Chienè, check out her work, Grow Our Game. Great work here in New York.
The Knicks are heating up.
All right, busy week for the Liberty, where we'll see if they can bounce back and stay atop the W standings. Definitely something for New York basketball fans to keep their eye on. Now, next month, we're going to have some more great episodes as we continue towards the end of the WNBA regular season and the start of NBA training camp. Special thanks to my guest for this episode, Chienè Joy Jones, doing tremendous work. Also, for my editor, Catherine Cooper, producer, Brian Rokowski, and director, Brianna Mutsin-Dashiaka, I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.